The agenda. Has everyone gotten a chance? There are some hard copies if anyone needs it. Yeah. I get a motion to approve.
So
Thank you. And seconded. Second. Done. All right. So our first agenda item, we were going to do we need to discuss the minutes?
No.
We discussed that.
no, just go right into
So we're no longer writing the minutes now, they will be recorded and then that's available to the public.
Is this board?
I believe it's board wide.
It's board wide. It was approved by the board at the last board meeting.
Yeah. The other items for tonight are Superintendent Samuel's going to join us and he'll give us an update on the goings on in District 3, what's going on. Our two items of old business for tonight are we finally put together the resolution that we had worked on in September on support for newly arrived students. And the second part of the discussion tonight, separate from that resolution, will be a continuation of the conversation you had last month about the class size working group recommendations. The new business item, or actually I might throw in there, is that I put this resolution together based on the conversations we had in September. Because it's education, because it's New York City, there's always like fast breaking news. So this week's fast breaking news is that the 60-day limit on temporary housing is kicking in. So many families have received deadlines that they need to move out of where they are by December 27th. And for families with students in schools, you can imagine there's a huge knock-on effect to schools and to those students. So we can discuss that depending on the timing, maybe right after we discuss this resolution or at the end of new business. Tracy, is the superintendent ready or should I wait a minute?
We could probably use a minute. We were meeting pretty late and I just got a text that he'll be on momentarily. Mariella's joining us also, the deputy soup. So I'm hearing from them, just need a minute.
Okay, no worries.
Let's
We'll
see
move on to the resolution. We might not finish that conversation.
Mariella
But-
says she's on now. And
Okay.
she said she's
You know-
just got on. I'm not sure. One sec. I don't see her though.
Well,
Is she an attendee? Because I can promote her.
Yes, Mariella Graham.
Okay, yeah, I see her.
Yes, she's the deputy soup. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. While you're waiting, read the resolution so we're ready to talk about it when we get to it. And I mentioned, feel free, it was written very late at night, edited up.
No apology.
Yeah.
Are we starting with the resolution?
Yeah, I think
Oh, she's on. No, we're gonna. We'll give Kamar another minute. Just because I think the conversation gets crazy if we start this conversation. Your comment.
He said to let you know he's coming. He might be in dad mode. Hold on 1 second.
And I think actually it's good that Mary Ellen's here too, because we might have some questions in regards to the resolution. Since if my problem with writing it is we discussed in September and things change between September and December. So it was like bringing everything up to date data wise. Am I gonna get like a terrible feedback loop if I leave you alone with no sound here?
With no sound.
It was like if I face there.
If you have audio coming out.
I should not have.
No audio.
Yeah. There we go. Why don't we go ahead and I'm gonna have Mariella introduce herself. The first item is it's just a district update on what's going on in District 3 to bring us all as a committee kind of up to speed and what we can expect over the next year, what the ongoing issues are. So thank you for joining us.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mariela Graham. I'm the Deputy Superintendent. And once upon a time, I was also on the Community Board 12. So I have a lot of respect for all of the time and energy that goes into these volunteer positions. Kamar and I do have a PowerPoint, so I can just start it. I'm sure he'll come on. Is that okay? Oh, there's Kamar. So I'll just say a couple things. Do you want to go ahead, Kamar, or do you want me to do the first comment?
Continue. Hi, everyone. I'm here. Go ahead. Continue.
I get to do the fun slides, and then I'll let Kamar do the update. So we just wanted to share some of the work that we have done in District 3 this year. So this is an arts and cultural fair that Gail Brewer put together for all of our principals, all 29 of our principals, to really make sure that the arts and the cultural organizations that are available to us in our district really get implemented and live in our schools. And so this was a really great event that had, I think, over 80 organizations. It was also a way to make sure that when there is funding that comes from the borough president or from city council, that schools are prepared to partner with arts organizations. Oftentimes there's sometimes like a lag between getting the funding and then needing to have the program make its way in front of students. And so this was a great event held at the Rubenstein Atrium. So we just wanted to share that with you. And then also just that last week, right before Thanksgiving, we had a town hall event in District 3 up at the Joan of Arc campus with the chancellor. That was just a great way to kind of showcase a little bit of the work that's doing for parents and families to have access to the chancellor and hear a little bit of what he had to say. I'll turn it to Kamar. I don't know if you want to add something here, or I can move on.
No, not necessarily, but actually, yeah, just say it was really good to get the chance in front of families from T3, and I think that folks had an opportunity to really engage or ask some tough questions, and he did a good job of answering. And when he needed, I came in and I can talk about some of the things that we talk about.
And then before Kamar goes into some of the updates, I just also included a slide that shows the schools in our district. So 23 of the 29 schools in Community School District 3 fall within the borders of Community Board 7. And so we just broke them up into elementary schools, K-8s, middle schools. You're probably familiar, but eventually I guess we'll probably just send this to you so that you have it. And it was also just helpful for us to kind of make sure that we're all talking about the same set of schools also. All right.
All right. So first of all, thank you all for the invite and thank you for having us. We wish we could be there in person. My wife was not feeling that well, so I decided to come home instead. Took me a little time, but thank you. And I would like this to be the beginning of an ongoing dialogue and relationship with Community Board 7. We want to talk a little bit about test scores. They're not everything, but they are something, and they're something that's important. Overall, we've been recovering from the pandemic, and we had a slight increase in our ELA test scores, our reading test scores. We saw some moderate increases last year. but it was pretty significant for students with special needs, you know, across economic disadvantage. We were pretty flat in the L's piece, but the biggest jump and a very important jump is the ever L's. So those are students who were formerly L's and now or formerly English language learners and now are not English language learners. And what you see here is something very, very powerful, especially in the context of New Yorkers, that when our New Yorkers and when families or children who come here not speaking English, when they actually learn to speak and write and read the language, they outperform students who were never else, right? And I think that is something that underscores the opportunity that we have with our New Yorkers, and we need to get that right. It's a very tough thing to do, but when we get it right, we would have maximized the opportunity that is with us. Instead of seeing it from a deficit mindset, we ought to be seeing the asset base and the strength base mindset of the New Yorkers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on upcoming slides. So we can go to the next slide. So in our math scores, we saw some significant increases. We went from a 55% to 62%. And in our students with disabilities, in general, we saw significant increases there from 25% to 35%. And also with our students who are economically disadvantaged, this similar increase. And then here again, we see our current L's making a small increase, but our ever L's, again, significant increase from 51% to 71%. So that's a 20 percentage point increase. With math, we saw generally across the city significant increases. And, you know, that was partly because students were back in school. Some of the minor changes to the test, someone asked the chancellor a question, and I thought he had comparing tests from year to year. There were some changes. Does it make sense? It's like apples to oranges, you know. And his retort was, it's more like oranges, comparing oranges to tangerines, right? Because it's a little bit of a change, but it wasn't an overhaul. So seeing increases where you can actually still measure some of that. But just to, you know, my big takeaway is always the ever L number. And so in kind of going into using that to transition into the conversation about D3 open arms, some of you in the room have been have participated in D3 open arms before, I think, and just a group of District 3 families who really care about wanting to serve our New York as well. And then so we've been working with them and trying now to streamline some of the processes that we have in place to make sure that, you know, we've taken on and welcomed more than 1,800 New Yorkers since last, not July 2023, but July 2022. And now we have to make sure that we are supporting them in their school journey. And so a big part of that is we just got a grant to support effective educator development. We have to really look at what it takes in a really granular way. Now that we're organizing with Open Arms to kind of figure out, you know, quote drives, the political piece for, you know, what it means to seek asylum, the processes, trying to get kitchens, trying to do all of those pieces, but recognizing that if we don't get it right with our students, that will be all for naught. And so we have a grant for up to 10 schools that is going to be working with some folks directly on supporting effective educator development as it pertains to our New Yorkers. So I think, so these are some of the things that we have, like a resource share that we can talk a little bit about. We have AP and principal professional learning that we're doing, and attendance monitoring. So we'll kind of go through some of those things as we go forward.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think that this is kind of our way of showing that this is a new challenge because of volume. And we're really just trying to leverage all the different possible pieces. So whether it's like community organizations or the supporting effective educator development is with Kansas University. Or whether it's working with our principals or attendance teachers or central staff, that we're really just trying to pull everybody together, because it is, it's something that I think requires like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, and just one second before I go forward. The attendance monitoring is challenging because a lot of our families, have transportation concerns. They, have, so first it's like a metro card issue, a transportation issue, making sure that we solve as much of those things as possible for our families. And then we have now the 60-day rule that we're up against. So when families are moving around, certainly some of them will move out of the city, but some of them will move or not necessarily have a place to be. And then school is like the most stable place for them. And many times, because they're so they're in such a vulnerable spot, their kids they keep their kids with them, and they don't necessarily send them to school. And that creates a huge challenge, because if it doesn't take much to be considered chronically absent in the system, you really just need to, you have to miss, if you're less than 90% present, then you're considered chronically absent. And we really have to make sure that, and of course their educational outcomes will be impacted if that's the case. So you might have heard one of the big initiatives across the city is our New York City Read, which is meant to streamline or really codify the process that we are using as a district and as a city to teach our kids to read. And for us, what this has meant is there are a change or a proposed change to our literacy curriculum. And the city in general had 15 districts start out last year, and the other districts are going to be implementing next year. And because of that, we have a process to choose a new curriculum, one of 3 this year. So we've met with our teachers. We've done a CEC subcommittee. We have launched the process, and where we launched the process with our Deputy Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, Caroline Quintana, and she came to and really helped us to kind of speak to our parents and really be clear about why we were making the move, and the big why we were making the move. There's these 6 shifts that we're going through in the department, and one that got a lot of attention, certainly in our district, is the first shift, which is to say we're going to do explicit phonics instruction. It doesn't mean that's all we're going to be doing, but we are going to, where needed, we're going to do explicit phonics instruction. Now, in many of our schools, in fact, most of our schools, the overwhelming majority of our elementary schools were already doing explicit phonics instruction through foundations. What wasn't necessarily happening is a level of fidelity that needs to happen for it to be successful. So what we're doing this year and going into next year is to make sure that it's not just you don't just have the program, but you're doing it with fidelities, and you're monitoring its effectiveness in the classroom. So that shift has not been as huge a lift for our district in concept, because we were already doing foundations across and Hegarty, which is a phonemic awareness program across the vast majority of our school. I think only one school wasn't. And so we're now in the process of choosing one of 3 curriculum, which is interreading, which is an HMH interreading. So another one called Wit and Wisdom, and as well as expeditionary learning. So we've met with the vendors, we've talked to our parents, and so and our teachers and our principals, and so we're going to be we need to get to a decision by the end of December. So we're close, we're leaning. We'll see we'll see where we actually end up. Something that I thought was interesting, certainly for the schools in CB7. We had some principal changes. So at Center School, as many of you know, Center School is the only new principal in District 3 as a part of CB7. John O'Reilly is the new principal at Center School, and he replaced the legendary Elaine Schwartz, and she, we really worked closely in the transition, and I am happy to say that has gone really, really well. John is an experienced principal from District 13 in Brooklyn, and ran not a similar school. I can't say a similar school to Center School because there aren't that many schools similar to Center School, if any, certainly in DOE, but as close to as there is, with a progressive mindset, progressive model. And I think John has done really, really well in the transition. We also have assistant principals in one new assistant principal in 166. We have, which is another school in CB7, and also in Anderson, and in we also had a new principal in 166. Sorry, in Anderson. The rest of the schools I think are not in CB7. Am I right about that? Is 145 in CB7 and 160?
It is.
Oh, they are okay.
Yeah, except for 149, 180, and 76.
Got it. So so yeah.
And it's also nice to just say that a lot of these assistant principals, that for the replacing assistant principals, is that they've moved on to principalships in one in the district and a couple out of the district. But just to say that like the leadership pipeline, I think is pretty healthy, I would say, in District 3.
Yeah, not only that, it's a really great opportunity when you have 9 new assistant principals to really think about the future of the district and and build transition very, very well. So we are pretty excited that we have the opportunity to do that. You'll hear a lot in the press or in the community about budgets and what it looks like for next year. We are heading into what by all accounts is a budget crisis. We have a couple of things that are a couple of stars that are aligning not in our favor. The one being that the federal stimulus funding is actually running out, right? So we're in our 3rd year, so this is our last year where we're gonna get a federal stimulus money, and then also the mayor has proposed an additional 15% budget cut on top of that. So we'll have a lot of time to debate and figure out what priorities what are our priorities, as budgets are often about priorities. But currently, we're in a good position, partly because of the influx of New Yorkers. We have, of our 29 schools, 25 will receive a positive mid-year adjustment, right? So schools were projected to have a certain number, they've gone above those numbers, so they'll get a positive adjustment, and then 15 schools of that 25 will get over $100,000, which is great. We have 4 schools that have a negative adjustment, and we've actually worked with all those schools to now plan a sustainable path to the funding that they'll have. So we're in actually really good shape for now until the end of the year. But something else that's good, we actually applied to and received funding for fostering diverse schools from the federal government. It's $7.5 million over 5 years. And this funding is really for districts that are really going to work towards creating more diverse schools. This is again a federal grant. We applied in the summer with the support of our bar president, Councilmember Gail Brewer as well. And I just want to kind of just specifically read what it says. It says the need for diversity, representation, and high academic experiences for all children is multifaceted. Given our demographic making 3 in New York City, we have the unique opportunity to create an integrated community impacting an estimated 12,000 children ranging from pre-K to 12. In order to achieve this goal, we must simultaneously work on the composition of our schools. So it's the people that are in, the students that are in our schools, making sure that's a diverse body, and then ensure that we create culturally affirming environments characterized by high academic expectations and rigorous learning experiences. The balanced composition of the school, specifically with regards to socioeconomic status, it can positively influence the academic achievement of all students. And it is on this basis that we are applying for the Fostering Diverse Schools grant. So we will have resources that will allow us to make some positive moves as it pertains to creating more diverse schools. So I'm going to stop there. I know I have questions and maybe even concerns coming from CB7, but yeah, those are the things. And again, I hope this is an ongoing dialogue that goes beyond tonight.
Yeah, I had a question. This is Kevin Reevey, I'm the co-chair of YEL. On one of your slides, I noticed for the reading scores for economically disadvantaged, I think the percentage was at 24% up from 20%, but the gap between the overall has widened between economically disadvantaged students and the overall students. So my question is, given the budget cuts and then this grant, how much of that is being allocated towards reducing the gap in reading? Because to me, that was a huge standout on that slide.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge standout, and what I think what keeps myself and our team up at night when we think about District 3, right? I think your point is well taken. The grant, I would say, I'm trying to think about a move that is not directed at that gap. I almost want to say 100% of the grant is with that gap in mind, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be, directly, after school high dosage tutoring, but certainly if we think about budget cuts and if that's what our school leaders kind of think is going to make a difference, and we don't necessarily see we don't necessarily have the discretionary funds in our budget to do that, we will look at those things that you would think of traditionally as the direct things that are impacting the gap, but we certainly think of enrichment opportunities, and we think of high dosage tutoring, and we think of ensuring that we have a rigorous environment. But I think going back to the New York City Reads piece, I think for me, that is the big shift that I think is going to really impact that, because that is in the classroom every single day with the time that we have, and being more strategic at how we're approaching reading for all of our kids, but particularly students who are not exposed to as much reading outside of school.
Do you have a sense as to, so with the mayor's proposed budget cut of 15%, and then you add this grant on top of that, and you said it's 100% being allocated to reducing that gap between economically disadvantaged students and the rest of the student population, what the net of that is in other words, it's going to be a net benefit?
No, I can't look at it like that. There's like, I mean, there's so many things that go into a school budget. Like, I mean, we can sit and talk about it, but it's not we're losing we can't actually, the vast majority of funds that go to us, that come to the district, don't come to the district office, right? They go directly to schools. The 7 million is separate from a school budget, and that's coming from the federal government. That's coming to the district directly. So the schools obviously will have they have to fund their teachers. They have to fund, like, there's a lot of overhead or direct costs that are involved with the actual school. And so what we have to do is to say, all right, if there are ways that we can support the schools from 59th Street to 122nd Street, all of our the 29 schools, we have to see where we pitch in. But it's not a one-for-one comparison by any stretch, because the funding that's actually in the school is vastly more than we can actually fill the gap with, even with this grant.
Yeah, Kamar, I'm just gonna throw it open and there'll be a bunch of questions from committee
Sure.
members.
I had a question about the READS program.
NYC Reads grant. Go ahead.
NYC program. You were talking about 3 different curriculums that you guys are looking at. Is there a difference among the 3? And also, is this curriculum going to be replacing the Teachers College Reading and Writing program, the current one that they have? And then also for that, I mean, this is a 3-part question, sorry.
Well, let me just answer. Wait, I can answer. Let me just quickly answer the second one, which is yes. It's going to replace it's meant to replace TC.
And then how do you go about screening for is it done by the teacher on an individual basis, or is it centralized somewhere when you screen for reading difficulties?
Okay, great. So I answered the middle one, right? I'll go back to the first part of the question, which is what's the difference between the curriculum. So when the DOE, when we looked at our schools and the concerns that we had with the curriculum, we wanted to get programs that taught phonics instruction directly and explicitly. We wanted to get programs that after that, teaching that directly, then give students time to practice what they have learned in actual reading in books, right? So we wanted our books to align to what we were practicing in direct phonics instruction. And then also we wanted to make sure that we had content-rich curriculum, right? So that we were including content in what we were doing. So I would say for the 3 curricula we're looking at, they each have their their strengths. And first we did this with our teachers. So our teachers looked at the curriculum in all 3 in the summertime. We had a group of teachers look at it, and I'll say in terms of decision making, it wasn't particularly helpful, but because like our K-2 teachers wanted wit and wisdom, and our grade 3 to 5 teachers wanted interreading, and then our middle school 6 to 8 teachers wanted expeditionary learning. But it was helpful in terms of the conversation that we had about each curriculum and the pieces that we saw. I think the strength of, let's say, Wit and Wisdom is that it gives it doesn't pretend to teach phonics instruction. So it says use foundations for the direct explicit instruction, but use what these books call geos or decodables. These decodables go with our unit that are built, and our units are built in the content. So they're reading what are called decodable books that are interesting, and while practicing that what they're learning in their phonics instruction, and that's directly tied to the content of the curriculum. So that was strong, and that's probably why our teachers in K-2 wanted that. Interreading has like a Spanish adaptation that goes with it. So for our dual language programs, they kind of like that idea. I know Wit and Wisdom is saying that they're also going to produce a lot of their materials in Spanish too, but Interreading has that already, and Interreading also has a more structured, I don't know if it's more structured, but more scripted approach, which I think many of our school leaders and principals school leaders and teachers didn't necessarily like. They want to be able to bring some of the practices that they've honed in the school over the years to the curriculum. And then expeditionary learning, I think was really strong in terms of some of the content that it brought to the table as well, but also did not have a lot of the foundational literacy pieces that we were looking at. So it's an interest, and I think for middle school, their middle school piece seemed, I mean, a lot of our middle school already use expeditionary learning, so that seemed like it might be more fit for middle school than for the lower grades for our district. All right, so I think that answered, and yes, this is all a part of the replacing the Teachers College, right? Reading and writing workshop. And then the final question, sorry, I forgot the third one.
Was it? I think you answered, which is screening. How are you going
Oh,
to
yeah,
go
yes.
about
Sorry,
any of that? Is that done on an individual teacher's basis, or is it
Yes.
going to be centralized?
So both, right? So the first thing is there is a centralized screening process in the same that we've undergone in the DOE for the last 3 years. And the idea is, when you go to the doctor, it doesn't matter which doctor you go to, the process is the same in the beginning, right? You get your blood, you get your blood pressure taken, the weigh you, that kind of stuff. So the screening process is the same across. We want it to be the same across all of our schools initially, right? So each school has a choice between for grades 3 to 12, and certainly 3 to 8 in our case, between 2 screeners, the MAP, NWEA MAP, or the iReady program. And that kind of gives you a sense of, okay, is a child on grade level? And if they're not, like, what are the areas that need work in, that kind of stuff. And for K-2, there's another screener that we use called Acadience. And that gets a sense of, like, do you need to work on word sound recognition or whatever, all of those pieces in the lower grades. And this is done in both math and ELA. And then so you get a general sense with those. And then if you want to find more, then oftentimes if you want to get a more nuanced understanding of, okay, why is this child 2 grades behind, you might need to do an additional diagnostic, which is kind of based on, the teacher would have to make a decision based on what they see from the initial school-wide screening.
I'll just
Thank
add
you.
that.
Yeah, you
I
can
was
add.
going to say that the screeners that that are given and have been administered by the city there's also a mid-year screener, right? So there's the one that happens at the beginning of the year. There's another one that will happen in January for teachers and leadership and the district to kind of reassess like how students are progressing. And then there's an end of year assessment also, which is all separate from like state testing. This is really more to be like formative assessments to help teachers direct their instruction.
Kristen? Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that if I understood correctly, that one of your goals going forward is to achieve greater diversity. And my question is, how do you plan to go about that? Number one, and number two, will the influx of immigrant students into the school system be counted towards that effort to achieve diversity? And
Great.
should it be?
Great. Yes, it should, from my perspective, it certainly should. And also, it will and already has impacted that. So prior to the influx of new Yorkers, we had a host of dual language programs, right? Dual language Spanish programs in the city. That's why we were actually uniquely positioned structurally to take on so many students in a, I'm not going to say it's in a seamless way, but in a way that would not have been as disruptive would probably be more disruptive to other districts. So yes, so when, for example, the row opened in Hell's Kitchen and District 2 was at capacity, you know, we looked at our dual language programs all along the 2-3 line. So if you think of like PS 163, PS 87, PS 75, those schools that have dual language programs that were under enrolled, and or they had dual language programs where in a dual language program you really should have half of the class should be English proficient and half of the class should be Spanish proficient, and they should be learning from each other in that process. Some of our classes suffered from not having enough students that were English language learners, and so now we have gotten that balance, and so that's exciting because it's added to, like you said, the diversity both socioeconomically and racial diversity as well. And then to answer the first part of your question, which is I hear it as like, what are the things you can do, or what are the levers that you can pull to foster more diversity in schools, right? So there are some traditional levers that the DOE has put forward in the past, you know, such as you might want to do some kind of structure with zoning, or you might want to do something like we did last year, like merge 2 schools, or some kind of structural adjustment. And we're going to look at some of those when we have opportunities to do that. We'll do that, but I think the vast majority of that part of the grant, we're going to think we're going to be really thoughtful in a community engagement process, right? So I can't tell you what we would do, but what we will do, but I'll say we will be engaging and we'll have working groups throughout the district and the community that will have these conversations, and those would be led by the district as well as folks from the department, just to really look at data and hear the concerns of folks, hear what new programs people would like to see, hear what are the opportunities, what are the challenges that we're facing in our schools, so that we can and out of those working groups. We actually have one happening right now in the northern part of the district, not in your community board in Harlem. Out of those conversations, out of those engagements, we hope to have ideas that push the thinking even of the department around some structural ways that we can address that. Now, it's important to have the composition of schools that represent the district, but it's even more important that when you have that composition, that you're really addressing culturally responsive and sustaining practices in your school, including how welcoming you are to parents and of all sorts, and how what are the how are you holding all families and students to high expectations. And so where we have to work within the professional learning, we have to work with professional learning to make sure that we're doing that part of it as well. It's not just tinkering with zones or doing mergers or creating new programs. It's what is the experience like for the child in these environments and families in these environments every single day.
Thank you.
I'm gonna jump on that SIPS grant conversation, because I was part of the original SIPS application under Eileen. That was a while ago. But it sounds like, first of all, I'm so thrilled to hear about the focus on the culturally responsive part and professional development, because that really does have to go hand in hand. But it does sound like a lot of the focus on elementary schools rather than middle schools, just because the mechanism is, well, like the dual language programs, we don't have that many, right?
Sorry, she just asked, I think the person who asked the question asked specifically about how New Yorkers could add to diversity, but the question, just to talk a little bit more, what we're looking at in the grant, in our proposals, are the things that we're thinking about. We're actually starting with elementary school. Sorry, starting with middle school, not elementary school. So we, as you know, we've maintained, or as you may know, we've maintained the lottery system throughout our middle schools as the admissions process, right? And so, because part of the rationale, not the only rationale, but part of the rationale is that we know that some of our screens processes did forward segregation in our schools in the past, right? And so we want to continue to look at the data, because right now the reason the lottery is working in terms of allowing most of our, upwards of 95% of our families get their top 3 choices, right, in our district. So over the last 2 years, we haven't had the complaints of not getting into the schools, or we definitely have not forced placed anyone into a particular school. That's partly because of the enrollment, where we are in enrollment. Now, one of the consequences of the lottery is that you're going to continue to see schools that don't get don't have a lot of demand, have lower and lower enrollment, and that's when we have to think about how do we have a structural move that may reduce the number of seats available, because some of the middle schools are just way too small and can't really offer the level of programming that they need to. And it's not just standalone middle schools. These are K-8s who have, and in the K-8, just like a very small middle school that doesn't have like a strong experience for kids.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. And I think with the lottery, I believe they maintained the DIA weights, the diversity and admissions, but if you don't have enough applicants, the weights don't kick in anyhow. So
That's right. That's right. It's less, the DIA weights, it's less impactful, or is less needed when you have a straight up lottery, right? And so that then just becomes where families choose to go to school, right? And then when you have fewer, if you have in real terms, if you have a lot more seats, then families can choose to segregate in a different way, right? If you have fewer seats, first of all, it's not effective, but if you have fewer seats, there's less of an opportunity to do so,
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, if no one else has questions now, I'm gonna stay on enrollment question. Just to preface this, the other thing this committee is doing tonight is we're looking at a resolution we wrote back in September. We're getting to it now to support new New Yorkers in the schools. So a lot of that is about enrollment and about budget. So one thing that's been raised and was an issue last year was the day of the enrollment snapshot. Like historically, it's October 31st. I got an email from a principal today that it seemed to be saying it was December 31st this year. So I'm not clear on that.
No, it's the same. It's still the 31st, but I think there's like another adjustment coming on at December 31st. So I don't think that's going to. And Mariela, I don't know what they've said to you on this, but like for me, I don't understand that to be another look at the enrollment. I think it's an adjustment in funding, but still using the October 31st numbers, right? Did they change that?
Yeah.
I don't think they changed.
No, so October 31st, so there's usually 2 rounds of mid-year adjustments, but the October 31st is the number of students. So the second round that they use December 31st is, in terms of students with IEPs and, are they 40% in special class or is it 60%? So there's usually, it's a tweak around the students who are already counted using the October 31st date of the count.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the same. It's also the if you might have a concentration weight kind of thing that's gonna come down the pipe, but like really the number or where students were, they don't then say, okay, so what happened between October 31st and December 31st? Did students shift then? No, that doesn't happen. It's really how do we get closer to the special the special populations during that time.
Right. Well, I'm asking actually because last year, because new arrivals arrived throughout the year, right? They're not all enrolling in September. Last year there was Project Open Arms, which meant there was funding to follow these students. So it sounds like there is no Project Open Arms this year. So what are you anticipating at the school level as far as funding to come with new students who come like, across the desk later?
Yeah. So to be frank, I mean, I think the district is, I gotta look back at the number. I don't want to quote a number. The schools are getting significant fundings right now to be honest. They need to be able to, they need to organize them. We need to support them to organize themselves to spend that money well so that they're able to meet the needs of any students to come. But when I look at the level of the number of students that came in September and October was pretty high, but then the students are actually for some schools it was pretty high. And where we sent students, those schools will be funded pretty well over the next for the rest of the school year, to be frank. It would have to take significantly more, but when we do get significantly more students, there is an appeals process that the district manages on behalf of the school. So but that's less formal than the December 31st adjustment.
Okay, that makes sense. And another thing that tied with enrollment.
Can I just add something to that? It's also that we have been working really closely with the Office of Enrollment. Like we have a weekly standing meeting. So when there was like a larger influx and, it kind of comes in ebbs and flows, we're able to direct enrollment a little bit. So if there are, for example, extra seats in the 3rd grade in one school, so that doesn't require another teacher, right? It's like the class only has 12 kids. We can put some extra 3rd graders there, but if there's a new 4th grader and that school actually doesn't have open seats in existing classes in 4th grade, we might tell enrollment to please direct that family someplace else. So I think even up until now, I mean, through the October 31st and even afterwards, this kind of really close coordination with the Office of Enrollment has kind of helped us not to overwhelm a school in a way that would have significant budgetary implications.
Yeah, I'll just add to that as well. Thank you, Mariella, for that. And as I think we've just become better, both as a district and as a system, at responding and knowing, for example, where is the latest HERC going to open up, and finding out how many kids are going to be there, and trying to say, okay, does the zone school, our position now, since we've taken on so many kids and many of our schools are, pretty full, we've now said, all right, we're treating all New Yorkers as zone fam. So if a HERC opens up in your zone, like, you're going to be treated as a zone, you're going to go to the zone school. Now, if you go to the zone school and there aren't enough seats, or if we look at in the zone school and there aren't enough seats, then we try to say, okay, here are the ways that we're going to make adjustment. Here's a school that's close by. 166 and 333 is coming to mind because this is where this happened there. So if 166 doesn't have enough seats, we'll call 333, or we'll put 333 as the secondary school, and then they go there. And as Mariella pointed out, it's really pretty granular. It goes grade by grade, class by class. And we were able to reorganize ourselves this year to create the new relationship with the Family Welcome Center to do that.
That's great. That's really good to hear. That's a challenge, Family Welcome Center, but that's my bias.
I'm sure it's a challenge for you. It should not be a challenge for you, but we make sure we've built the relationship, and it's not. We have open communication with them, so much so that if a child shows up without any documentation to our schools know who to contact in the Family Welcome Center, and how we actually and how the district can support getting them the documentation. So if you don't have the space, that the child will then, or that family leaves that school with the documentation to go to the next school.
That's what I was going to ask about next, because this sounds actually very granular and really successful in placing students. But what do you think the impact of the 60-day rule is going to be on that?
I'm tempted to say that one's above my pay grade, but but you asked in the context of the impact on schools. So what we're trying to do is to support schools and have schools support families, to be clear that, first of all, no matter what the 60-day rule says, you have a space in our school, right? So you can, the McKinney-Vento Act guarantees you a space in our school. Schools are also spaces where families can be informed about the right to shelter in New York City, right? So there's some of that our schools are also like informing families about, and we are. I mean, it's definitely a challenge, the 60-day rule, but we are really trying to make sure our families are informed about their rights. And then finally, a lot of the challenge there becomes we have to expend resources when families move out of the city because they're still on our register, and we're trying to track them down, and many of them don't want to tell us where they went to for whatever reason, fear, or so that's been, and so our attendance teachers have struggles in that regard as well. So I think those are the things that we've been thinking about and challenged by.
I mean, I will tell you, my concern is that traditionally, Office of Pupil Transportation has been a disaster. And I don't trust them, to be frankly, to be moving students appropriately across the city in like a timely manner. That's not your department though, so that's.
No, it's not, I mean, sure. But what I'll say to that though is District 3, we've been very focused on getting adults Metro cards, because, you know, I live here, you can get anywhere in District 3 within a half an hour by the train, right? And so, you know, I'm not as, yes, I agree, we have a host of challenges on buses, including, you know, making sure that there are matrons on the buses to kind of keep things safe as kids. So there's a lot of challenges there, but, you know, I also don't want families trying to jump the train start and then get arrested and then, or get some kind of ticket. And so, but so because it's easily I think easily accessible in the district, we really focus on, in terms of transportation, we really focus on the Metro card piece.
That's logical. That sounds great. Does anyone else have questions for the superintendent?
Well, I don't know if it's a question, but I was gonna say one weird thing with this. I don't know much about DOE. I feel like I've been here for like almost a year, and I feel like all the other conversations when DOE hasn't been here, it's been very doom and gloom, right? Like every meeting I walk away from, I'm like, oh shit, that sounds terrible. Whereas this meeting, when DOE is finally here, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like they have some challenges, and they seem like well equipped. Smart people handling the situation. So I feel like I'm missing something. Does anyone else have that same like feeling? I don't know. Yes, kind of. Maybe I'm missing some other piece. I don't know.
Oh,
It
no,
just
I
seems
think
like-
this is kudos to Kamar for bringing the positivity.
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize the presentation by like numbers are up pretty much across the board. Could be better, but pretty good. There's challenges, but like I don't know, he's got things set up to take into place. Like I don't know. Yeah.
Well, as long as it's not toxic positivity, I'm good. I really feel that it starts with, for me, it started with, and you know, I'm an immigrant myself, and so it really starts with viewing this, certainly the migrant situation, as like an opportunity for the city, and certainly an opportunity for schools. But you know, it is a challenge, and our principals, you know, the families have really many times traumatic stories that they're coming into our schools with, and I'm not saying it's, you know, a bed of roses, but we're really trying to organize ourselves to meet the need. And we were fortunate that we had space in many of our schools to kind of take folks on. And then also, I did tell you, right now we're in a good spot for the budget piece, but there might be doom and gloom coming at the end of the year.
I do also just want to add, I mean, I think that District 3 has excellent principals who really have, you know, been in their roles and in their schools for a long time, and are definitely kind of up to all of the challenges that come with every new thing, right? So most of them were there during COVID, and, you know, now there's something else, and next time there will be another challenge. But I think that there are some really strong leaders in the district.
I also want to add, we have one of the most amazing group of parent leaders in the city, present company included, Kristen. And we're just really grateful to have the collaboration between our parents, our principals, and the various community organizations that have rallied around the latest issues. And so we're very fortunate here in D3.
Thanks, Tracy. Ira, did you have another question, or we're
No.
pretty much wrapped from the superintendent?
I'm good.
You're good. He had just noted that the budget is coming in June. We will have to have another round of conversation with our new budget.
Yes.
But other,
Yeah. So first of all, thank you again for inviting me. I'm happy to come. I'll try to put it on the calendar every month, and then you know, just if there are anything, if you need anything, as you can see, I work with a great team. Tracy is phenomenal. Mariella is phenomenal, and so I stand on their backs. So whatever you need, we'll be we're definitely available.
Perfect. Thanks so much. We will definitely reach out.
Thank
All right.
you.
Guys,
Have a good
thank
night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Alex. Bye-bye.
I will say Kamar has always answered my emails very quickly, but I'm like, oh, we need a new number.
I think Alex said what, at least what I was thinking, but I think most of us were thinking.
Well, on Tuesday night, we had a meeting here with DHS and we were discussing the same issues, but just from a different end.
Oh, interesting.
And so there was a lot of discussion about the 60-day rule. They said, well, we haven't actually enforced it yet. So we're, well, yet may mean tomorrow,
Right.
maybe never.
Right.
We're hedging our bets.
So in preparing our resolution, which we're about to get to, I spoke to an elementary school principal in District 3 this morning. And she was definitely concerned, and she said part of the worry is that many families have actually received the notice, like a physical notice that says 60 days, and they got that October 27th. So they're anticipating whether it comes to fruition or not, a move out December 27th.
DHS was sort of been very cute about it, as if they were suggesting that they aren't real notices. But I won't say that.
Yeah, and that would be kind of cool. Be like, we just sent out a bunch of fake notices so people think they're homeless. Like,
Yeah, well, we
something like
people
good
like
practice to me.
express it out.
It might be window dressing, you don't know, and ask Shelley Fine what it really is.
Yeah. And maybe we need to listen to that. How long is that? Since 6 minutes. Do we want to make any more comment under the superintendent section, or should we move on to the next agenda item? Yeah, let's move on to the resolution, because it was kind of tied in with what he was discussing. One update that I definitely pulled from his comments was the enrollment, the number of new arrivals. So paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll just update to, he said there have been 1,800 new arrivals in District 3 since July 22.
When you had,
It was more convoluted. I had 1,102 X date, blah, blah, blah. This just summarizes it more cleanly and more accurately, since it's the latest numbers.
so are we the resolution?
Do we have any more comments or
I
questions?
have a question,
Mhm.
maybe nitpicking, but whatever.
Yeah.
Are you or anybody else using the term asylum seekers different to immigrants?
I have
In
to,
my mind, there's a difference.
so one thing
But
we,
that may be my mind.
it would be good to read this with, because I did actually like chop and change from different things we had written over
Okay.
time. So the term had changed. So last year, when we spoke about it, the term we used across the board was asylum seekers. I was leaning towards, because I had heard Kamar give other presentations, and they keep talking about newly arrived students or new New Yorkers. I actually like the phrase new New Yorkers. Just sounds welcoming. But then one of the budget lines in the DOE that they receive money from uses the word immigrant, because there's money tied to the immigrants. There's also money tied to families in temporary housing, students in temporary housing. We do know that our student temporary housing population in New York City has been really large prior to any sort of migration. We have an immense homeless population. No, go ahead.
But that's a very different set of issues.
It is a different set of issues, but the money, when it comes through, like what Kamar just said, without Project Open Arms, which was tied to, I don't know, at the time we called it asylum seekers. I'm not sure what the bureaucracy called it. They don't have that. So really what they're drawing the money on now is either temporary housing, because most new arrivals are in temporary housing, or this one fund that's federal tied to immigration. It was SAM 73, which I looked into and I thought, oh, this sounds great. And then I subsequently found out it's very little money in the end of the day. That thing is a drop in the bucket. So that's why I felt comfortable sticking with like still asking for money like they received last year under Project Open Arms. But do see if the language is used consistently through this document. Like, what do we want our one term to be?
That's a problem because, I mean, for example, there's different people posing different threats to like the shelter.
Mhm.
And right to shelter seems to mean different things at different times and some people thought the right to shelter meant Midtown Hotel without the room service. So other people thought it meant tent and
Like that, yeah.
well, exactly. So there's a lot of stuff floating out here, and some of the people are not necessarily immigrants. They actually want to be where they're from, but they can't now. Asylum and something.
Right.
It's a very screw this. I don't know if anybody read the Joseph Berger article in the Sunday Times, which was a different set of people at a different time, but numerically not dissimilar, and literally staying in some of the hotels, Broadway in Amsterdam.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I
I know that,
recognize that
no
there are
relation,
these
I see.
diverse. I'm gonna read it now, but it's Berger.
Yeah.
Is this the one about the
wholly
family
agree.
from Italy?
Sorry,
The family from Italy, that article?
it's not,
Was that Berger? Anyway, okay.
this was post World War II.
All right, but for this document,
They were obviously not going home.
Right.
So some people that are coming here are obviously not going.
and many asylum seakers are not going home.
But they were also, some of them also looked at as New York as a transition point to other
Right.
places. And one of the things is, I mean, my family is from part of my family is from a coal mine.
Hang on,
town.
Ira,
I'm
but
sorry, but I'm saying,
I want to
they
just
also
bring it back
looked
to
to
this document.
transition to move from New York to a place that would actually flow into.
Right,
Struggle as much as New York. So you're looking for a good generic
good catch.
term.
good generic catch-all.
My one concern is that we don't tie it to a particular source of funding. Because
We
that,
have,
that
yeah,
pigeonhole,
exactly, because those are too specific, exactly,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of the challenge is that they're trying to draw from all these specific things and just say like, yes, we qualify for that. It's really just attempting to garner the money.
Yeah, well, that's the process by which these people are trying to make their way. Because if you have to call yourself bringing one.
Oh, I
day
meant
and
DOE,
apple
but
the
yeah.
next day.
Yeah. But that's why I tried to keep, and I probably didn't catch the term every time. I just said newly arrived students. To me, that sounded like
very-
kind of neutral.
Term and
Yeah,
I just needed to know in my own.
Yeah. So I does need a read through to make sure it's used consistently throughout the document. The budget piece that is a little more nuanced that we hadn't discussed at this level in September. In September, we did speak, remember Naveed had come and spoken to us, and he is with that D3 Open Arms, he's also on the PEP. And he's also a parent in a school that took in a lot of migrants. We had talked, mostly the funding discussion was about Project Open Arms. The kind of new twist to this is this report that just came out from the controller's office that said these mid-year adjustments, which is what Kamar was talking about with the funding that changes right every year in January, February, is supposed to reflect the weights that exist in the fair student funding formula. The one weight that they're not measuring this year, for Lord knows what reason, is students in temporary housing. So if you are a student with an IEP and there's an SWD, student with disability, or you're an L, all of those have weights and they will be counted in the mid-year adjustment. For students in temporary housing, they are using the data from the year prior. So the controller raised it as a concern, like, we're leaving money on the table if we're not counting the students who need often additional services. That's why they have that weight in the first place. So I just threw in part, page 2 under funding, the third paragraph. Oh, it's actually, I'm just writing these paragraphs weirdly. The first sentence about the city controller is the paragraph before, so I will readjust my grammar and move that paragraph down, that sentence down. So end of paragraph 2.
Ask you about that, maybe the following paragraph. When you said they would be eligible, a school
Mm-hmm.
that had more than 5 new arriving students, they would be eligible for $2,000 per student.
Yeah,
Is that per new arriving student?
per new
or
arriving
for
student.
all students?
No, per new arriving student.
Could you make that a little
Yeah.
bit clearer?
For some schools, it's considered money.
Yes, and all of that is important. However, it's also moot because it applied last year, not this year. It's a bummer, because that's money they're not getting.
It's a kind of hidden budget cut.
Yeah, and money that you had that was considered bonus money, you just don't get the bonus, but in reality, like you pointed out, Kevin,
Right,
it's still less
that's-
money at the end of the day.
Yes, yes. Accounting getting treated.
Yeah. And so the problem is reflected there, and then the ask is reflected on the be it resolves. 1 that says DOE must implement the fair student funding weight for students in temporary housing during the mid-year allocation, as it does for other weights included in the fair student funding formula. And that, I think, is the only like significant kind of tweak to what we had spoken about.
One of the questions we cannot in the paragraph, the suggestion of the office excluded in temporary housing. That would be a new structure.
I had to change the language on that. It is the Office of Refugee Student Resettlement. And that was something we had discussed in that September meeting with Naveed to centralize support.
I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that office would be responsible to, if we were to have such a.
Right, it was to make a centralized office,
Right.
right, so that everything can feed up, everything, let's say you're a resettled student. Everything that they need, almost like case management, can occur through that office. So if, God forbid, you get moved after 60 days and now you need transportation, we know that reaching out directly to Office of Pupil Transport usually goes nowhere. So if you have this other office that says, this is your case, this kid got moved from Upper West Side to Brooklyn, what are we gonna do, right? That's like a centralized case. When it really is case management, then the other issues that can come up at the school level, like, are they receiving the supports they need? Whether it's, have they been screened for, students with disability? Do they need psychological or support services or speech therapy or whatever, like what services? So the idea was that by coordinating it centrally, they'd have more control, and then also they'd have better communication, which is something Kamar seemed to feel like they had, but advocates for children just testified to city council they don't have, which is communication between the temporary housing where students like just land at, like a kid arrives, and the school to know that the kid has to come here. Right, so the idea was that a centralized office could help facilitate that.
More efficient, it's like one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understood it is that even though the housing may change during these 60 years, for school, it's not necessarily.
Well, that's
No.
but that is the fact for all students in temporary housing. That's actually a federal law. The problem, the hitch with that which we see now in students who have been in temporary housing for many years in New York City, is that you can literally be moved from the Upper West Side to a shelter
Right.
way out in
But
Queens.
they don't have a 60. In
Right,
this case. Trying to say that, but they may move you from a hotel here in 10 blocks to a hotel here. They move somebody from this hotel to that hotel.
well, that's the
and
whole
that
unknown,
satisfies the 60-day
right? Like
rule.
that is the unknown. So if you could still walk to your school, great. It hadn't even occurred to me that if they were gonna bother making the move, that it would still be that close, but that would definitely be better than moving across the city. However, it's such an unknown. Yeah. Oh, so you are entitled to stay at your school, you just have to get around,
No, that's always been.
right?
Before you go ahead, it's like we had a lot of kids coming from there, for example.
Right. Yeah, and students in temporary housing, historically, not just like the new influx, have really, really crazily terrible attendance rates because it's often very difficult to get to school, right? Amongst other challenges of just being at school each day. So that's an issue that's been on the table for a long time, much less like moving people now. But anyhow, we did not discuss the 60-day rule in this resolution because it only came up this week. All right,
It's been talked about or something like that.
yeah, so it's got that, but everyone's panicked this week and it's like down to the wire.
How do you or do we include in the students who are in shelter? Is that temporary housing? You know, there are
In this
a large
resolution,
number-
sorry, we're talking about the 60-day rule, which
I
is
know.
different.
I know,
So I shouldn't have gotten distracted by that. Students in shelters are students in temporary housing. This resolution
is
is,
that what they call, okay. right.
yeah,
I see
this
the-
resolution is only talking about newly arrived students. Students who live in like quote shelters are, that's literally students in temporary housing, like that's the definition of that term,
They're putting multiple groups in the same pot.
right?
Yeah,
But that's why we're saying newly arrived. Okay,
regardless of,
yeah. Any more questions about the resolution, or should we just call it out?
That's called.
All right. All in favor of resolution on support for newly arrived students? All right, all opposed? All abstaining for cause? All abstaining not for cause? Terrific, we got it. Resolution passes. And what's your vote? I didn't see it. Oh, I didn't put my hand up. Sorry. Oh.
Good catch.
Yes. And we will bring it to full board, which is on the 5th, which is like any day now. All right, so the next agenda item is moving on to the class size working group recommendations. I'm gonna have it over to Kevin for that.
Okay, yeah, so those of you who were here at our last committee meeting, we have some class size matters, share with us some statistics and some analysis she had did on class sizes. And as you know, based on her work, governors, you know, signed in the law that 20% of classes have to meet certain class sizes based on, you know, whether they're if it's K through 3, 4 through 8, and high school, 9th grade through 12th grade. And this, along with funding, as well as increase in the number of students, has resulted in, so she said 69 out of 1,600 schools, when she shared her presentation, met the caps. And then she shared with us,
So 10%.
yeah, 10% of the schools. This was in the schools.
Yeah.
And then also there was, and she had some recommendations in terms of capital planning, and I don't want to go into the details again of the presentation. A hiring of teachers, prioritizing schools with more needs. And then she shared with us couple weeks ago, her updated statistics. So based on the new statistics, based on the 2023 school year, so the percentage of classes that have met the cap have gone down. So it's 31% versus the prior school year of 34.4%. That's K-3. And then grades 4 through 8, it's 31.4% down from 32.5. And then high school, 36.9 down from 39.3. And she said, based on the trajectory, and then, so this year, 20%, next year it's 40%. And based on the trajectory, we're not gonna make the numbers. And so and also there's a 5-year plan that I think the DOE came out with. So the New York State, or the DOE, they said it would cost tens of billions to implement it.
The city said it.
Yeah, the city said that, that's right. And so I know we had discussions afterwards, and we thought that putting together a resolution was just like.
And one of the problems is, is that we have this one issue that we talked about just before, we have this other issue. And why do we have more kids? We just talked about it.
Right,
here.
exactly.
So,
Right.
and so it's kind of funny, is that sort of smaller class size is a great idea. I don't know how it's achievable. And having been involved in building schools for many years, don't do it anymore. Tuning now, it's different system, different issues. There's been a consistent problem of finding places for new schools, and then building them in a timely fashion. I think some of us here sat through the PS 191 process. Okay, and that one we had to actually force the issue.
And we did build a new beautiful school.
But it took several years, even after we had the core shovel the building there. And for those who have been on the community board a long time, for example, how long did it take to go from the time we got Riverside South to Riverside Center now to agree to the shell to when we got to school? 10 years, 12 years, something like that. So it's a very long process. And so it might be one of those things that if we do it, and we don't have a natural or recurring enrollment problem, which we may well have, given demographics anyway, you can't build yourself out of it. It's you know, it's this if you put the class size of 35 to 25, and you're doing it in 5 years, you can't create that many classrooms. You end up doing is buildings. You can't do this. DOE has a leased schools program, and they take lousy space. They'll take a warehouse and build classrooms, or a factory in Long Island City, and they'll build classrooms. We want there to windows, and you can create spaces like that, but they don't really do it. I mean, it's easier now than it might have been 10 years ago. A lot of the computer infrastructure is wireless, and you don't have to provide the power, you don't have to provide the cabling or anything.
And
So
sometimes they do all right with the buildings. West is a leased building.
that's a leased building, but that was a building that had been a school for a generation before,
Right.
and it's a very long-term lease, and that's a different
An
kind of
exception to the kind of,
because that was already in a residential area.
yes.
I mean, if we had to find a site for a school today in this district, we would either have to go into a schoolyard and probably go back to temporary buildings.
Has all that CBS property been assigned somewhere
Where?
already? Which TV company just?
ABC.
ABC.
That would be the economics of that are absurd.
Yeah.
And the economics of that are not for the school.
Right, exactly.
There is one place I just
There was actually a little bit that one.
I won't- I'm not allowed
But
to.
anyhow,
Okay, and then the problem is that we'll be able to have sites without competing with affordable housing.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to generate these spaces. Yeah, I want smaller class size. But what are the mechanics of it? And then the other problem, we had the same conversation with the people here earlier this year, is where do you find the teachers? You can't, you know, it's not like, you know, when we have a snowstorm, the Department of Sanitation has a list of people that come and shovel. Okay. And but it's not the same with teachers. You need a pipeline. You need a pipeline, and it's a long pipeline before it comes out of it.
And then you gotta make sure you keep what you have.
Right.
Yeah, and then you gotta plan for the time, which is a whole other issue.
so I wasn't at last month's meeting, but it sounds like the feeling at that point was that we're not ready to go ahead with like drafting up some sort of resolution. Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll move on from that. I'll put my 2 cents in that. I think in the long term, I'd like to see it, I think with a long view. I'm shocked. In all my years of working with parents and as a parent, I couldn't believe that the announcement that class sizes could be smaller was met with anger. I was like, what? What am I on? I've never heard that before. But there are very practical logistical issues, so with a very long runway, it would be my ideal.
Probably that's one of the reasons why I mentioned the education and construction fund, which is an existing vehicle that's been around since the 1970s, where you can build housing and an apartment building. It's been done. I've done it. The problem with that is once you find a location, that's great, but then all of a sudden you're back to the mayor's land use proposals, which would allow that to actually happen.
We're gonna put a pin in the class size thing. We're gonna move on.
I think we have to say it's a great idea.
Right.
Yeah.
In theory, yeah.
So we're not making an official statement that says great idea, but we're just moving on. So the new business that I had put on, and we kind of discussed around it, but we have to decide if we want to do something tangible, is about this 60-day rule. I sent like a whole slew of articles and statements in an email to everyone this afternoon, just because like Ira is right, the writing's been on the wall for it, it's been discussed for quite a long time, but I feel like it just reached a fever pitch in the past like 2 weeks. I think that is because should the rule actually go into effect, it's soon, right? Like I said, this principal spoke to me, she said some of her families have received notice that they have to move. The families are in panic. She as a principal is confused what it will mean for her budgetarily in her mid-year adjustment. Like, are these kids on her enrollment? Aren't they? What's going on with that? So my feeling is that a lot of the worry, at least from the principal, is all the unknowns, right? They're not being very transparent up front with the administrators who have to do it about what it means.
You know, you might want to talk again to those here just tonight was housing.
Right, which talked about it.
HHS.
Yeah, that is. I'm not feeling good. Oh, no, feel better.
Hope you feel better.
Yeah, thank you. Ira, was the agenda item that 60-day rule, was that the focus of it?
It was discussed because we have people from DHS, you know,
Right,
and people, and one person specifically was dealing with these issues.
and so is that committee doing any resolution or
No,
anything on it?
we were just doing this for information.
All right,
You think it's helpful?
I think
to the group, what do you think?
I think it might be worthwhile to have the two chairs of that joint committee
Meet each other, yeah.
further about it to us, and they may be able to peer into the box. Is this all hiding out in?
Yeah.
Because is this, first of all, where do you move people to? The only thing you can do is play a shuffle game
Right,
or charter buses to Texas.
right.
That's just what,
That's
So
why we
there-
have them.
There's a lot of unknown. I'm
I'm
happy,
joking, but
Kevin, if you and I reach out to the other chair.
Yeah.
My concern is that this bus is moving quickly, so if we want to do anything, But if this change comes into effect, it's at the end of December. If we as a committee want to make any sort of statement, that means we have to do it before.
I mean, I think we could do it in terms of the educational impact,
Right.
which would have the hopefully the indirect impact in this these areas. But this also, for all we know, may be real. Or what are you gonna move people from one hotel to another?
Yeah, I have no idea, but
From a hotel here to Floyd Bennett, the people in Floyd Bennett are gonna move to this hotel.
you're right.
I don't think the families in Floyd Bennett. That's right.
No, they've said they're putting families in Floyd Bennett, which I work in Floyd Bennett a lot. I'm a bird monitor. There's someone out there,
What on it?
a piping plover monitor.
Oh,
They're
like
an
bird.
endangered bird. Yeah. So I'm there a lot. It is actually a really lovely space to visit for the day. It's not a great space to put a family in a tent. Right.
It is one of the few places that have public camping.
Yeah. Yes, they do public camping and terrific fishing. So if you want to fish, it's a great spot. So I don't think we have enough like knowledge to write anything right now. If there's, I will speak to the other co-chairs. If there is like enough impetus, if they feel like the community board needs to say something, I'll kind of, the one thing we are allowed to do as far as letter writing is go back through anything we've officially stated through resolution and see if we can use that in the letter writing, like use that as the launching off point. So when I find out from the HSS committee, if we think we want to do anything, I will certainly circulate that
Both
information.
HHS and the house.
Yeah, oh, they did it together.
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have stuff for her new business? Oh, really? You're good.
Kristen,
Hmm?
it's Alex. There's somebody from the public who would like to raise something during new business.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, we'll call on them. I don't see their name, but go ahead.
I'm gonna
Very good.
promote,
Promote them. Yeah.
okay, Alfred, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, I believe I unmuted.
Yes.
Okay, I know, I mean, you've already covered a lot of ground. And I understand this is, possibly a brand new idea that I'm introducing tonight. So, it'd be fine with kind of introducing the idea and coming back in the future to discuss it more thoroughly. Because just observing your meeting, there's one thing about your community that's true, it's the thoroughness of what you go through in order to address issues. So basically, I'm part of a volunteer coalition called Vote 16 New York. And we are supporting the efforts of the New York State Legislature, specifically Brad Hoylman-Segal and the New York State Senate and Robert Carroll in the Assembly to have the voting age for local elections, state elections, and the municipal elections, city elections, reduced from the age of 18 to the age of 16. And we are also supporting pending resolutions in the New York City Council. There's one resolution that's been sponsored by Councilman Sean Abreu, which would amend New York State election law, which is necessary to lower the voting age. And then there's a second resolution sponsored by Gail Brewer, which would amend election law and would also mandate electorally related civics education for every high school student in New York State. So that's the crux of what our involvement and what the coalition is about. I would just.
Alfred, all our local elected. Yes, they're all ours. Gail, Sean, Brad, You're an Upper West Side Coalition.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. I mean, I live in Washington Heights. And, it's a similar situation up there with it is unanimously agreed to by all the elected officials from the congressmen to the state legislatures, Robert Jackson and De Los Santos, down to the city council people, Sean Abreu and Carmen De La Rosa. Everybody agrees this is, something that they want to see happen. We also have support from organizations that have been, promoting civics and youth engagement for years. One of the groups is a Generation Citizen, which promotes civic engagement, participation in the classrooms, both middle schools and high schools throughout New York City, and Why Vote New York. The executive director, Sandra Balaban, has also come on board, and some of the student leaders in that organization are being trained to become advocates on a citywide level. I guess the final endorsements that I would mention, we have 2 chapters of the League of Women Voters. The chapter in Massachusetts, has come on board several months ago, and more recently, the chapter in Maine has come on board. And representatives from that chapter in Maine are forming an advocacy initiative to try to get other chapters of the League of Women Voters to come on board with supporting this initiative.
Well, Alfred, this sounds really interesting, actually. So what I think we'll do is if you can drop your contacts just in like the Q&A, I'll pick them up, I'll follow up, because maybe what would work best is if we had you or someone from the organization come and present to the committee.
Yes.
So talk about it, that would be really great. So I'd like to get you on the calendar in the new year. Do you have a time frame you're working off of?
Excuse me.
Like, you have a time frame you're working off of? Is there
this is not something that's going to happen in 8 weeks or 12 weeks or probably 50 weeks. I mean, it's it's a major initiative, and to actually get the changes in the state to come into law, it's actually a 3-step process. I mean, the state legislature would have to vote yes in both chambers. Then they would have to arrange for a referendum in New York State for all the voters to vote. And then after that, they would have to have a second vote in the state legislature, and it would have to be signed by the governor. So I don't see how we're talking about 3 years.
So what we're gonna do.
Could I narrow your focus a little?
Yes.
We first have education. That's really, really important. And I haven't seen a lot of that happening. And as somebody who has one kid just got out of high school and one kid that just went into high school, that's a great idea. And the sooner they can get it, the better. And I think that's a separate issue for changing the voting age. Let's teach people how to drive before we give them a car.
Well, I think the first thing is to get the gentleman before the committee.
Yeah.
But what are the education committee? That's what I'm
So the
thinking.
youth committee.
Yeah, it's what youth education libraries, yeah.
Okay.
So I think this is the appropriate venue. Like I said, Alfred, give me your details and we'll follow up and schedule a meeting where you or someone else can come and present to us, because it's an interesting idea. I am definitely gonna look to our high school students to be involved with this.
And the importance of civic education.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my links in the chat for now, as
I
well
don't
as.
think we want that open, right?
Oh,
No, we
maybe.
don't have a chat.
Okay.
I think
So-
I actually have, I might have your email actually, so I can also just give it to the committee.
Yeah, I dropped off an advocacy packet at your office about a week and a half ago, I think it is. And I'm not sure where it is. Maybe it's in the office somewhere. But what I could do is by tomorrow morning I'm going to have a prepared list of several links in addition to myself, like Generation Citizen and Why Vote, and the contacts for other people that are supporting the legislation. So it'd be kind of like a link list for you to look at. And if you look at that, and I don't know if they can upload the advocacy packet in your office and share it with the youth committee members? Does that work? Or should I try to, get it to you online?
Apparently, we're not printing anything, but you can share your contacts and those links to Alex in the office, and she'll get it to Kevin and I, and we'll be able to schedule something with you. Does that work, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we may have emailed from our general email address, so I can pass your contact along to Kristen and Kevin.
Okay, very
Perfect.
good.
Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us, Alfred.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And thank you for all the, I mean, the work you do is, I can't believe the detail that you were able to follow in that DOE presentation. It's just, it's heartening. You know, that the committee people like yourselves that can do that. Thank you so much for that.
All right, folks, are we adjourned?
Yes.
Yeah.